I just recently visited the Pixar Putt mini golf pop-up in Long Beach, California, and I'm going to share with you if I think that it's worth your money. The way that this video is going to be broken down is we're going to rate each kind of feature to determine if it's worth the money. We're going to talk about theming, we're going to talk about representation of the Pixar universe, we'll talk about the difficulty of the holes, the navigation of the pop-up as a whole, and the overall value. So if that sounds interesting to you, just keep on watching because we're going to get into that right now. So first we're starting with the theming of the Pixar Putt pop-up. Definitely has that local mini golf vibe, but more elevated what you would expect out of a Disney product. They did incorporate a lot of elements, some of which you would see at normal mini golf. They have on one of the Toy Story holes, they have the opening and closing of the ventriloquist doll, which you see sometimes as a clown, which is also kind of scary. The Cars themed hole had a loop in it, and there were a few interesting features as well. So one of them was the claw, where you drop your ball into the claw machine and it gets spit out, and that's your first stroke. They also had for Soul, they had the piano where you launch it down the piano keys and it goes down towards the hole. And there was also a similar drop style one for Inside Out, and where you pick which hole you drop into and it can go down the little chute like it's going to headquarters, or it just falls on the floor and it takes you a little while longer to get to that hole. And the quality of these, honestly, I thought it was pretty good considering that these have been all throughout the country. They don't look overly damaged or worn down. On the Inside Out 2 hole, it wasn't working how it's supposed to. I think it was supposed to be like a windmill style, but unfortunately it was not working at that time, so you just shot it straight through anxiety. And so that made it a little bit less exciting, but that's all I can think about in terms of things not working on the course. In terms of representation of the movies, you had a good portion represented. The Toy Story franchise had 3 holes out of the 18, and Inside Out had 2 holes of the 18. The movies that were represented on these holes were Elemental, WALL-E, Cars, Bugs Life, Coco, Ratatouille, Turning Red, Finding Nemo, Soul, Up, Monsters Inc., Incredibles, Luca, Toy Story, and Inside Out, as mentioned earlier. Now, there were 3 Pixar movies that were not represented. One of those was Brave, which I think was a real tragedy because I think that could have been a very interesting hole, as well as Onward. I think they could have done something really interesting with Guinevere the van for it, and The Good Dinosaur, which frankly I don't really care about. But I think we could have probably replaced an Inside Out hole with Brave or Onward, and definitely one of the Toy Story holes could have been replaced with one of those 2 movies as well. So I gave a 4 out of 5 for the representation. And I think they did a really good job incorporating the movies into the holes. So the way that each of these holes worked is that each hole would have some kind of story, some kind of goal you're getting to, and that goal is ultimately what the hole is. For Monsters Inc., for instance, you are trying to go towards the sock. Obviously very relevant. For Coco, you're trying to cross over the Marigold Bridge to get you into the land of the dead. And in Soul, you are going down the piano keys into the hole, which is how Joe Gardner met his untimely death. So that might be a little bit morbid, but overall I think they did a really, really good job. Each hole had a lot of elements from the movie. For instance, for the Finding Nemo, you have Nigel there. In Ratatouille, you have the larger-than-life cheese, almost like you are Remy himself going through the kitchen. And the final hole, the up hole, even has it where you hit your ball into the hole, and then once all of your group hits the balls into that house, the house then flies up into the air and goes over to Paradise Falls, where the balls are then released down the falls onto the green. In this case, it's the water, and then you can finish up the hole. So overall for theming, I think they did a really good job. It was really fun to recognize things from the movie, and I'm giving the theming a 5 out of 5. In terms of navigation of the course, it is laid out pretty well. The holes are pretty much in order. There was a little bit of confusion in terms of figuring out the next hole, and you do buy your tickets according to a tee time. But it still does get kind of backed up. If you have a larger group, for instance, we were a group of 2 people playing and the group in front of us was a group of 4. So obviously we were most likely to finish before they would be done. We were consistently waiting, and some of the harder holes do have a buildup of people waiting their turn on that hole. And especially if there are kids who may take a little bit longer to finish that hole. Also being said, sometimes you do have the pressure of finishing quickly. The group behind us, I think, were a lot better than we were and were consistently waiting on us to where I felt very rushed. So in terms of navigating, I would give this a 3 out of 5. This being said, this is pretty typical of any miniature golf course I've gone to. It's most usually not the leisurely activity if it's a busy time. So keep that in mind. Maybe that'll determine what tee times you're doing, especially if you're going on a weekend. It's definitely going to be more crowded. I'm still giving it a 3 out of 5. That's a pretty average experience of what I've experienced at many mini golf courses. So the difficulty of the holes. All these holes are rated a par 2, 3, or 4. Now, some of these should have definitely been a little higher, especially given that you do have kids playing on here. And most of the holes were that kind of rubbery playground material, which was fine to hit on. The balls rolled appropriately and stopped appropriately. 2 of the holes, the Ratatouille hole and the Finding Nemo hole, both had this wood flooring. On the Finding Nemo hole, it was even more like planks. And this looked really nice, but was awful to play on. So if it's not completely leveled, the ball rolls back and forth, which made these holes take a lot longer than they should. So those 2 holes I didn't like as great as they looked. Those were far too difficult with that wooden flooring. I much preferred every other hole with that kind of rubbery turf type of material. In terms of difficulty for kids, this is going to be probably pretty challenging. They're not easy holes by any means. Some of them do take some maneuvering, especially with some of the special features of them. For instance, on the Coco, you have to go down the strings, and if you don't go down the strings, you just fall into the abyss, basically. And so I think for little kids, this may be a little bit more challenging. And they do ask that you observe a 6-stroke maximum, so that way there is less of a backup on these. So in terms of difficulty, I'm giving Pixar Putt a 3 out of 5, not because it's too hard for me, but because some of the difficulty I think wasn't appropriately rated for the par, and also some of the added features they had were unnecessary, and it just made it extremely more difficult with the wood floors. So the overall value of going to Pixar Putt, they do estimate it at an hour-and-a-half activity, and that was pretty close. That was almost pretty spot on, even with the waiting. So you are there for a good amount of time. It's not just a quick 30-minute thing and you're done. You are there. It is a good activity that you do get to spend quite a bit of time at. As an adult, I thought it was really enjoyable. I loved seeing all the features. And again, none of the holes were too difficult except for those wood ones. I didn't find myself getting frustrated and not wanting to play. It was a very enjoyable course to go on to. And now to the cost of this. If you go on a weekend date, it is going to be $32 plus $2 service fee at the lawn. At least, I don't know if this varies from location to location, but at the Long Beach location in California, on a weekend, it was $32 for adults plus $2 service fee, $30 for children plus a $2 service fee. Or if you're doing a family 4-pack, it'll be $25 per person plus a $2 service fee per person. If you have a family of 4, that's minimum going to cost you $108 to go to this activity for an hour-and-a-half. If you go during the week, $30 for adults, $28 for kids, so only a $2 difference, but the 4-pack does remain the same during the week, $25 per person plus $2 service fee per person. So this is a pretty steep cost. It's not like it's significantly cheaper for a child. It's only $2 less, which isn't that much. So I could see where that might be kind of expensive. There's not like a food stand, there's not like an area to hang out at. You're only going there for the golf aspect of it. I think is pretty pricey. The place where I normally go is $15. You are paying for that Disney premium pricing, although I think the kids' price could be a little bit lower. I think that would be more fair. So overall, for value, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5 because I think it's really enjoyable, but it is expensive, so I could see why it may not be worth it to some people. Overall, if we average all the scores that we've given for each category, that puts us at a 3.8 out of 5 stars. Overall, I think it's worth it, especially if you are a group of 2 adults, for instance. If this comes to your city, do I think you should visit it? I think if you are a Disney fan, especially someone who maybe doesn't live in Southern California or in Florida, this is a good way to get that Disney experience without being in the parks. Would this be something I would plan on wanting to do more than once? Probably not. So I think it's good that this is a touring attraction and not something that is permanently there, because I probably would not visit it more than once, especially for the price. If you have any more questions about Pixar Putt, please feel free to leave them down below. And if you haven't yet, click that subscribe button before you go so you never miss a new upload. And on that note, have a magical day, and I will see you in the next video.